Hey everybody, it's Mike. Hope you had a great weekend. We are back with what is, and I can't believe it, our 20th episode. And to kick off today's episode, I want to tell you a story about a woman by the name of Tamika Cross. Back in October of 2016, there was a Delta Airlines flight in midair. On board that plane was a woman by the name of Tamika Cross, a black woman who was a doctor. During the midst of the flight, a passenger fell ill. And the flight attendant did what flight attendants do in that situation, went over the PA system and asked if there was anyone on board who might be able to render healthcare assistance to the ill passenger. Without hesitation, Dr. Cross immediately rang her call button. The flight attendant approached Dr. Cross, looked at Dr. Cross, and said to Dr. Cross, no, sweetie, we're looking for actual doctors. Undaunted, Dr. Cross provided to the flight attendant a copy of her medical credentials, proving that she was, in fact, what she claimed to be, a doctor. At around the same time, Dr. Cross provided to the flight attendant her medical credentials. Somebody who looked like me walked up to the flight attendant, produced nothing in the way of medical credentials, identified himself as a physician. The flight attendant took this man at his word, looked at Dr. Cross, and said to Dr. Cross, sweetie, we don't need you anymore. This is as clear a sign as I have ever read or ever seen of the way implicit bias can infect your workplace. And I want you to think about who are all of the people who are harmed in a situation like this. And of course, let's start with the patient, the passenger. Fortunately, this was not a case where time was of the essence, but you could certainly dig a scenario where it may have been, where literally seconds could have meant the difference between life and death, between living a normal existence and something that looked incredibly different than that normal existence. And because there was something in that flight attendant's background that informed that flight attendant that black and or woman cannot equal healthcare provider, they rendered that passenger at meaningful risk. I think we also can agree in a scenario like this where implicit bias reigns, Dr. Cross, meaningfully harmed. As a white man, I can't possibly put myself in Dr. Cross's shoes. I can empathize, I can advocate, I can be an ally. And notwithstanding the fact that I can't put myself in her shoes, I would imagine an experience like this at some level is anger inducing. I would imagine an experience like this at some level is embarrassing or humiliating. This is a person who's a doctor, who presumably went through 12 years of high school, presumably 4 years of college, presumably 4 years of medical school, a residency, I don't know, a specialization, a subspecialization. Dr. Cross was in school for 137 years. And there was something in this flight attendant's background that informed this flight attendant, once again, that black and or woman cannot possibly equal healthcare provider. Now, what about the combination of the passenger and Dr. Cross? For example, what about the next plane on which Dr. Cross is a passenger, or train, or bus? And a passenger on that conveyance falls ill. Now, I am hopeful that Dr. Cross is a far, far better human being than I, because if I put myself in a situation like that once, I am not going to put myself in a situation like that twice. There is no way I'm going to ring a button of any kind. So what happens now to the ill passenger the next time because of the way Dr. Cross was treated the first time? And finally, can we all agree? Delta. This was a New York Times headline in October of 2016. Now, for all I know, Delta Airlines had provided robust implicit bias training to all of its flight attendants. And this was just a rogue flight attendant. But we see in real time, in a meaningful way, the way our biases can infect the way people are treated inside of our workplaces. And of course, this goes beyond the situation with Dr. Cross and goes beyond women and goes beyond people of color, whether it's somebody's religious beliefs, whether it's somebody's national origin, their LGBTQ plus status, their differing ability, their religious beliefs, whatever it happens to be, we need, from a societal standpoint, certainly inside of our organizations, to do away with this anachronistic way of thinking, with this stereotyped thinking where we constantly make these snap decisions based on our ability to distill through innumerable sensory cues and in a very quick way come up with a resolution or a path forward that overwhelmingly is designed to protect us from and against things with which we are not familiar, or the way things hadn't been done when we grew up or where we grew up. Just two examples. There's a movie called Up in the Air. Stars George Clooney, Anna Kendrick, and J.K. Simmons. This is J.K. Simmons before the movie Whiplash came out, so he wasn't a big star yet. And the A plot of Up in the Air is George Clooney is a consultant. And the company that he works for gets called by companies going through mass layoffs and reductions in force. And Clooney gets on a plane and he travels to wherever he has to go. And he fires lots and lots of people. And he does so with empathy. And he does so with respect and with understanding and kindness. And Anna Kendrick is the wunderkind who's going to come in and revolutionize the process. And in so doing, she completely sucks the humanity out of it. That's the A plot. The C plot of Up in the Air is because of all of the travel that George Clooney does, he's like this expert travel guy. And there's this scene in Up in the Air where George Clooney and Anna Kendrick are going on their first business trip together. And they are at the TSA Security checkpoint. And there are 3 lines. And Anna Kendrick's not quite sure which line to go into, so she looks at Clooney, you know, the expert travel guy, and says, which line should we go into? And I don't know that I've ever seen a more obvious and visible and frankly troubling example of the way implicit bias works than it did in this scene in Up in the Air. Because George Clooney takes a very quick overview of the lines. And he says to Anna Kendrick, we are not going to go into line number 1 because of fill-in stereotypical statement about the people in line number 1. Similarly, we are not going to go into line number 2 because of fill-in stereotypical statement about the people in line number 2. We are, however, most certainly going to go into line number 3 because of fill-in stereotypical statement about the people in line number 3. And Anna Kendrick is mortified. She looks at George Clooney, you can't say that. And George Clooney looks at her and he says, sure I can. I'm like my mother. I stereotype. It's faster. That's how implicit bias works. Again, distill through so many cues. Form a very, very quick decision overwhelmingly based on visceral response or emotion as opposed to reason or logic. That is stereotyping. That's destructive. Because if we allow this stereotype thinking to be pervasive, and we are not deliberate, and we are not thoughtful, and we are not checking our biases, we will continue to make these snap decisions. We will continue truly far, far too often to make decisions based on the stereotype thinking that many people engage in all the time. Implicit bias is a subject that deserves meaningful attention. With all of the things going on in the United States workplace these days, with what we have seen, the war on DEI, with what we have seen, certain marginalized groups being targeted. This isn't a political statement. We need to make sure that our leaders in our organizations are not making employment decisions, are not treating people differently based on the biases that they have. Folks, thank you so much once again for taking a few minutes to listen. Please comment, please share this video. I can't believe you've been hanging around for 20 of these. I'm gonna plan on keep doing more, but in the meantime, I really do hope to see you all very, very soon.